A big win for the U.S. women, 2 goals for Gooch, and some potential problems for a designated player in Portland, all on the Daily. Next. Hey everybody, Nick Fershaw here with Greg Lawless, looking back at the biggest headlines of the weekend. We're going to start with the U.S. women's national team, a 4-0 win over Canada in the final of CONCACAF Olympic qualifying. Greg, we already knew they had a berth locked down for the London Olympics going into the final, but nonetheless, an impressive performance against Canada.
Total domination in this one. It wasn't just the scoreline 4-0, but it was the way they moved the ball. They controlled the midfield beautifully, and then it was the Alex Morgan show. She got the first goal, a beautiful goal, using her pace, getting in behind the defense, and then she set up the second one, and she got a third one as well that she put away beautifully after getting in behind and basically pushing off a couple defenders and sliding it home. And you know what? The shift to the 4-4-2 in this one really paid dividends in terms of allowing Alex Morgan the space to really get in behind the defense. We'll see what ends up happening in London, because the Wambach-Morgan attack up top always seems to work. So will Pia Sundhage, the coach for the women's national team, go with that sort of single striker position that she had early on in the tournament, or will she stick with that 4-4-2, allowing those two to dominate up top?
The Americans really ran roughshod over this entire tournament. They outscored their opponents 38-0 in this CONCACAF qualifying, really putting their mark on their berth in the London Olympics. And one last bit of news from this tournament: more than 25,000 people attended that final. So some rave reviews for how the tournament went off in Vancouver, but then the Canadian Soccer Association coming out and saying sort of vaguely that they might not have a matchup there in Vancouver for the men's World Cup qualifying based on that turf field. They'd rather play on grass in places like Montreal and Toronto. Have to see how that works out. The Canadian Soccer Association expected to make an announcement on Thursday about the venues for the men's World Cup qualifying matchups. Well, Greg, let's take a look at some Americans abroad, starting with Uguche Inyewu, the U.S. center back, with a great game on Sunday for Sporting out in Portugal. He got a yellow card early, and then the fireworks really started. 2 goals for him in the first half of this one.
Amazing. By the 27th minute, it was 2-0 over Biramar, and the game was over at that point. It ended up 2-0. Sporting now up into 4th place in the Portuguese league, and they still have some ground to make up to catch up with Benfica and Porto at the top, but it looks like they could maybe get their rhythm back.
Another American who played very well over the weekend, that's DeMarcus Beasley, who's really come on late for Puebla. He had the game winner and a 1-0 win over Jaguares down in Mexico.
Yeah, 1-0, and he gets the goal. They're away from home in this one for Puebla. It's a good victory, although Jaguares way down in the standings. Puebla themselves still 13th in the overall standings in Mexico, so they have some ground to make up as well, but it's still early in the season. Only 4 matches played for everyone in Mexico right now.
2 other guys in action over the weekend in big wins, FA Cup wins nonetheless. Jonathan Spector and Zach Whitbread, both wins for them. They move on to the round of 16, and another team that's going to be in that round of 16, coached by former Colorado Rapids coach Gary Smith.
Yeah. Stevenage getting into the round of 16 with a good victory. And who's their opponent? Tottenham Hotspur. So little old Stevenage, which is right now actually doing very well in the 2nd division in England, looking to get up into the championship. Now they have a big matchup. Tottenham coming to Stevenage, a huge test for Gary Smith.
And if you know anything about Gary Smith, you'll know he is a die-hard fan of the Tottenham Spurs. He actually grew up right near White Hart Lane. Moving on to Portland, where there could be some problems for their brand new designated player. Jose Adolfo Valencia, Greg, missed a 5th straight workout on Saturday. What's going on?
Well, a young striker brought in by the Timbers, and don't forget they got rid of Kenny Cooper recently, so he's expected to come in and score some goals for them. But Gavin Wilkinson and John Spencer both discussing sort of little red flags that have appeared maybe in the medical situation here. We're not really sure what's going on. It's all very vague, and they're, I think, just doing a lot of testing to find out what the situation is and whether they can move forward.
Of course, the Timbers back in action in preseason training this week. You can find out all the details and find out maybe and see what happens to Jose Adolfo Valencia on MLSsoccer.com. Last but not least, a handful of MLS teams in action over the weekend, most notably DC United and Chicago going at it, the first MLS on MLS action of the preseason. Unfortunately for the fans, 1,800 fans down there in Florida, a 0-0 tie in this one.
Yeah, but you know what? Some of the big stars came out. Pavel Pardo started for Chicago. No Dwayne De Rosario for DC in this one, but Pavel Pardo played about 30 minutes for the Fire. They also had a couple of guys who showed up. They didn't play. Pupo showed up, and Marco Papa also returned. So the fire now getting all their guys back. DC United, so many changes in the offseason. Be curious to see as we go forward in the preseason how those guys start to mesh.
One other quick note, the New England Revolution in action on Saturday, a 2-1 win over Tucson FC, and Kellen Rowe, the brand new rookie out of UCLA and the super draft pick, number 3 overall, with an assist and some impressive performances there for the New England Revolution. That does it for us. I want to remind everybody the new edition of the Extra Time Radio podcast coming out on Monday. We had a great week last week with Benny Feilhaber and Brian McBride, Steve Zakawani, and Bruce Arena. The latest edition comes out on Monday on iTunes and Buzzsprout. That does it for the Daily. We'll be back again tomorrow.